Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny panel on Monday, the 19th of May. Our first item on the agenda this evening is the election of a chair for the 2025-26 municipal year. Could I please ask the panel for any nominations for chair, please?
I'd like to nominate Chris Moriarty.
Do I have a second after that? Councillor Howard.
I'll second that nomination.
Are there any other nominations for chair? No. That confirms Councillor Moriarty as chair for the 2025-26 municipal year. If we move on to elect the vice chair as well, do we have any nominations for vice chair, please?
I would like to nominate Councillor Price for vice chair.
And do we have a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Teasey. And are there any other nominations for vice chair? No. So that confirms Councillor Price as vice chair for the municipal year. We'll just take a quick break now to allow Councillor Moriarty to come up to the chair's seat, and we'll go through the formal introductions.
Hello. So welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny panel. My name is Councillor Morris. Indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask that you leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it'd be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in this meeting and the role they are undertaking. So I've already introduced myself. I will pass on to our recently elected vice chair and move on from there.
I'm Helen Price, I'm vice chair.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Suzanne Cross, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Julian Teasey, voting member of the panel. Councillor Mark Howard, voting member of the panel.
Jessel Dolke, Assistant Director, Systems, Performance and Communities.
Lynn Lidster, Assistant Director in Adult Social Care for Commissioning and Finance.
I'm Eleanor Mallis-Fry, Qualities and Community Engagement Officer.
Sophia Wakeking, Assistant Director of Strategy and Communications.
Andrew Dowen, Executive Director of Place.
Thank you. Lynn Ferguson, Executive Director of Children's Services and Education.
Ian O'Donnell, Interim Executive Director of Resources and Section 151 Officer.
Councillor Simon Werner, Leader of the Council.
Mark Bealey, Principal Democratic Services Officer, and I'm joined by my colleague Chloe Plummer from Democratic Services as well.
Thank you very much. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. I will ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I am able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I would also like to remind councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I would ask that you please limit the repetition of points or questions which have already been raised by others. Where possible, please put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start on the agenda items. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, received an apology from Councillor Conneran. Just to note, a change to the panel membership since annual council last week. So Councillor Conneran and Councillor Cross joined us on the panel. And also just to note online, just for the records of the YouTube stream, we've got the Chief Executive, Stephen Evans, and we've also got Councillor Gertsching.
Lovely stuff. And I should say at that point, welcome to our new panel members, although familiar faces, but welcome to the panel. And I believe Councillor Da Costa's on his way. He's yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. He's just on his way. He'll hopefully join us as soon as possible.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to declarations of interest. Is there anyone need to declare any interest tonight? I think the closest we've got to a declaration of interest is we are talking about consultation processes later on, and I am the consultation champion. It doesn't mean I won consultations, it means I've been helping the team. So I don't think that class is a conflict of interest, but I just thought I'd make it known. Okay, so we move on to minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 27th of March, 2025. Any comments? Did we get any offline, and have we got any in the room? No. We're all good? Okay, lovely stuff. So we'll move on from minutes. Okay, rattling through the admin. So we move on to one of three substantive items that we've got today that we're going to go through. So the first one's the quarterly assurance report. Now I'm going to hand over to Sophia in a moment to introduce it. I want to, for the new panel members that are joining us and also for existing, this is a report that we get frequently through to this panel, and it ends up being quite a time-consuming item because it's a big document and it's got lots and lots of detail in there. Now, one of the things that we've been doing, just for the benefit of people that that may be watching or looking at this afterwards, we've been trying to elevate the conversation away from detail, and particularly operational detail, and getting it into more policy areas, specifically around corporate policy, which I kind of see as things related to HR, finance, IT, facilities as in the workplace and how we support staff, as opposed to, and the temptation is to talk about everything, because there's an argument and there's a lens that you can look through absolutely everything in this report and somehow drag it towards corporate. So I sent out an email probably to an old panel list, distribution list in fairness, but to say that what I would like this discussion to try and focus in on is areas where there's concern about perhaps trends. Okay, so if we've seen a particular item that's always red or is on a downward trajectory, and not to go into a discussion about whether it should be red or whether it should be amber and what's happening, but to try and understand, is there a policy issue that needs to be addressed? Is there something there that actually the policy isn't right? We could recommend that it needs reviewing. Or can we find out from officers, yeah, actually the policy is right, but we're not resourced well enough, in which case that's another recommendation to start looking at. So it's not about going through every item. We're not here to scrutinise officer performance. The officers are here tonight in their own time, effectively, to help us understand items, to help us understand detail. But actions and where we take it is for panel members and lead members and cabinet and such to move forward. So a bit of an intro into that. With that in mind, I will open up to panel. Any questions or points that want to be raised about the QAR? Oh, sorry, Sophia, do you want to introduce it first? Sorry. Oh, you can do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As you will remember, back in April 2024, after a large amount of engagement with councillors and community groups, Helen was a lot of those, I remember, we introduced the new council plan that was really devoted to fixing the mess we inherited. Council plan produced a list of deliverables and KPIs, and it's the performance of these that we're looking at tonight. We see the deliverables very much as a living document, each year dealing with particularly and getting all these problems sorted. We've just gone through the yearly refresh, but obviously here we are looking at KPIs from the previous year, from Q3. We're also really determined not to hide things as an administration that are not going well. And it's particularly those I'm interested in your comments on. We really do welcome your thoughts on how we can change the policies that govern the council to improve our performance on those deliverables that are currently sitting at red. I'll pass on to Sophia that will go through some of the detail.
Thank you. So as Councillor Werner has already highlighted, the purpose of the quarterly assurance report is to provide assurance that the aims and the priorities of the council plan are being delivered. And the report before you covers the progress against the performance indicators for Q3, so that's October to December, or where more recent data is available for monthly indicators until January 2025, that has been included. And it gives an update on risks, our transformation programme, audit, and the latest workforce insights. In terms of structure, there's a summary followed by sections that highlight more information on performance, risk, audit, transformation, and then the appendices provide much more detail. You'll notice the summary section now better links to relevant sections in the report. Now that's to ease navigation and accessibility, which reflects a recommendation from Councillor Wilson, the portfolio holder for corporate services. And reflecting feedback from members of this panel, the report also summarises the main points, including the key successes and challenges in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.16. On performance, so this report gives assurance that the aims and the priorities of the Council are being delivered despite the financial challenges. There's a total of 74 KPIs reported here, of which 46 are targeted. Overall, we see an improvement in performance. Of the 46 target-based indicators, 67% are RAG-rated green, 15% are amber, 15 are red, and 2% didn't have data available at the time of writing this report. This marks an improvement compared to the previous report in January 2025. While successes are evident against 4 of the 5 main aims of the Council plan, with budget pressures continuing, the challenges are reflected by risks and under the aim that states to putting the Council on a strong financial footing. Significant action has been taken to mitigate this, including agreeing exceptional financial support from government alongside continuing the extra financial controls and transformation measures. On risk, the risk environment remains broadly stable, albeit high risks remain in relation to the aim to put the Council on a strong financial footing. All strategic risks retain their risk ratings since the last quarter, except housing shortages, which reflects potential additional demand pressures that may be generated if government passes the responsibility of housing asylum seekers from the Home Office to local authorities. No new strategic risks were added to the risk register, and 2 new operational risks and mitigation actions have been identified. They're under insufficient highway staff and adult support packages. Most audit priority actions are completed, with 4 ongoing in contract management and no updates since the last Cabinet report due to our internal audit service, following up audit work on 3 priority audits. On transformation, 26 out of 27 transformation projects are progressing well, rated green or amber, with only 1 rated red. And this relates to the placement of children through residential step-down, regional foster care, family networks or kinship. Earlier, we reported on 50 projects. It's now been reduced to 27 because the rest have either been closed, they're on hold, or they're no longer included in the Future Shape Transformation Programme reports. I'll just focus briefly on some of the key successes and challenges highlighted in the report. Key successes include the successful migration of the new adult social care case management system, Mosaic. All 3 types of planning applications are now being processed within timescales and above targets, and a good response to calls answered within 2 minutes. And in the case of calls being abandoned within our customer service centre, this is now good despite a 9% increase in the number of calls. Performance relating to children's services is further improved, with a good performance in relation to the percentage of EHCPs being completed within 20 weeks, which stands currently at 100%. As 9 KPIs previously were rated green have shown further improvement and 3 sustained a good performance. To note, the last period, Q2 performance, was impacted by the annual education attainment measures, some of which struggled against the targets. As they're annual, they've been excluded from this report because there are no new figures to report on. Challenges broadly relate to those KPIs which have had a significant impact on the Council's finances. All 3 non-targeted budget metrics, so on forecast spend, savings and overdue debt, are on a downward direction of travel. And in adult social care, there are no new people have been placed in shared lives due to the long delay with the contract being signed off with West Berks. While the adult social care's outcomes framework survey-based metrics now show excellent results, ranking us the top 10 nationally for some areas, plus some which are better than South East and national averages, there is one area that's highlighted that is more challenging, which is a drop in the national rank for the proportion of care users that are satisfied with their care and support, which has gone from a percentage drop from 73% to 61%, which appears to be more due to service users giving neutral responses than negative, which have impacted the results, and this follows tighter criteria being attributed to care packages. Only 50% of foster children are placed with adult Achieving for Children independent foster care agency. The council continues to explore avenues to recruit, retain and train foster carers, including incentivised fostering, and has also now launched a communications campaign to attract and retain more foster carers. However, there is also an increase in children with complex needs, which becomes challenging. Connected to this, the transformation programme in relation to placement of regional foster carers is also marked red due to savings targets in relation to kinship care aspect not being on track. In terms of workforce data, adult social care still sees a high number of agency staff, so 27 out of 53. And the Place Directorate sees an increase of 5 agency staff from 12 to 17 in their housing and neighbourhood teams. In contrast, there's been a reduction of agency staff in the Resources Directorate, going from 9 to 6. Children has maintained their agency staff compared to the last 6 months at 28. I invite through the chairman and the members of the panel to review and comment and ask any questions of us on the officer team.
Thank you very much. Got a little musical interlude in the middle of that as well, which was lovely. Thanks, Sophia, for taking us through that. Okay, so I'll open it up to panel who may or may not have any questions or observations. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sophia. It's a really good summary. Just one, it's more of an observation. I actually sit on the corporate parenting team as well. And so I was looking specifically at children in care and noted some of the comments you made there. And actually, one of the things I volunteered to do was sign birthday cards for children in care and did April's. So I did 25 cards for April. And I was quite surprised that 15 of those 25 were placed out of borough. And 2 of those, if the addresses were correct, which I assume they are, were nearly 100 miles away. One was actually, what noted was one was actually in the town that I was born in, Kent. So one of the children was actually placed, significant distance away from, from borough. So, I mean, there's two points there. I mean, first of all, the cost to the borough for placements. And I know, so you're rightly saying there's campaigns for more foster care and kinship care and trying to get that red, out of red and into green, but also the cost to the young people as well, being placed away from, their families or their carers or people they know. So I'm just wondering, as a panel, is there something, I know that you've talked about the campaigns, I've seen the campaigns to try and drive for more foster carers. Is there anything more we could be doing as a panel or collectively as a council to be trying to improve that situation? Because obviously that would be a positive benefit all round for us if we could. So thank you.
You're absolutely right. We have got more children in care than we would like placed out of the borough. The majority of those placed out of the borough are placed within the wider sort of Berkshire area. Not all of them, as you've identified, but the issue we have is if we can't get foster placements and we've got to place children, young people in residential care, those placements can be anywhere in the country. And we try because, we want children to be as close to their families and their schools as possible. That's absolutely our priority. That's why we want to increase the number of foster carers, because we want our children, when it's appropriate, to stay local. But at the minute, we don't have sufficient residential placements across the country. And so when a placement becomes available, we've got to take it, because if we don't, there'll be another 20 local authorities wanting to use the same placement. But that is why, as Sophia discussed earlier on, we are really working hard on that communications campaign over the next year, because we need to increase our number of foster carers, and we also need to increase the number of children in our care who remain living within their extended family. And that's very much the government drive. What support can we give family members, extended family members, to care for children in their own family? So absolutely agree with you. We want to keep as many of those children as local as possible, but there will be some children who, for their own safety, need to be placed at a, you know, a greater distance away. But just to finally comment on your comment about what more can we do, I think there is a lot that all councillors can do to support this campaign. We still have got lots of leaflets. You know, if you want to become a foster carer, I know Councillor Price has been doing the rounds in your constituency, handing them out. You know, we'd be very happy to give those to councillors for the local area. You know, taking every opportunity you have when you are communicating with people in your constituency to talk to them about potentially fostering, GP surgeries, libraries, etc., etc. So, you know, I'm very happy to talk to councillors in a bit more detail, and potentially through Councillor Price, about how we can make that happen.
And on that, welcome, Councillor Da Costa. Just, you know, take your time, but we're just on the QAR at the moment, just to let you know where we are on the agenda. Okay, Councillor Price.
Foster carers, so it is important. And I think there probably is more that we as members could do. And I just wonder if it would be worth having a briefing and having some workshops for us to understand why it's so important to be kept in the locality for most people and the benefits that there is, and understand the sheer cost, not just to that child, but actually to our bottom line as well. So that might help us understand there's what more we could do on that. The other point that was raised was the care leavers who are not in education, training and employment, and for me to understand what more could be done to get those figures up.
Thank you very much for the question, really important question. We have got data that we need to provide for the DfE on an annual basis. And so how we slice the data there is very different to how we slice the data elsewhere. So sometimes what you will see when you're talking about young people, you will see different bits of data. And what we're trying to do is to make sure we've got one version of the truth. Some people talk about EAT, so those are looking at children in education, training and employment. Other people are talking about NEAT, those who aren't, and it all becomes a bit confusing. So we are working on the data element of it. And for this measure, the government, there's lots of rules and regulations about when young people are NEAT or aren't NEAT. And very often it will be to do with things like potentially they're serving a custodial sentence, and it may be young people who are pregnant, who've got particular health issues, particularly mental health issues. So there's lots of reasons why young people at any point in time may not be able to access education, training and employment. However, our figures are better than national, and what I can say is that we have been doing a lot of work since Q3, and next quarter we'll see an improvement in those figures. The important element for us, Councillor Price, is that we're working with the virtual school and college, and their big responsibility, their key responsibility, is to make sure they're targeting those individual young people who aren't in education, training and employment, and working with them in a targeted way to make sure that we find something that's of interest for them, whatever that might look like.
All we can do with the employers, because we're blessed in being an area of high employment. Are all the major employers signed up to the Care Leavers Charter? Are they aware? Are we taking advantage of the careers fair that's held in the library?
Yeah.
Is there more?
Yeah, well, we have a Better Futures event that's only recently started, but that happens on an annual basis, where local businesses as well as national businesses like John Lewis, etc., come together, and before they leave the room, we make them sign up to what they can offer our young people. However, we'd like to grow that, and we are working in conjunction with some colleagues within the borough to see how we can add to that pool of local businesses, because I don't think, well, I know we haven't got to all of the businesses that we'd like to get to. So that is work in progress. But I think it's a really good point. And that Better Futures event is so inspiring. We have young people who come and talk about their experiences and what they would like in an employer and what sorts of things they'd like to do, because not all of our young people want to be in an office. And that's very often what is on offer. We've got young people who want to do catering. We've got young people who want to be out on a building site. So it's about having that wider menu of things that interest young people, rather than forcing them into a box that they don't necessarily want to be forced into. So I think that flexibility is really important.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Price. Just on that, just something that popped into my head about other parts of the council plan that might relate to it. Obviously, we've said about creating an economic forum, which will have lots of business leaders in that. So I suppose it's about connecting dots across all the different bit. Lovely stuff. Great, lovely. Councillor Howard.
I'm not too sure who would answer this, but I've got a couple of quick questions more on the broad area of finance and bad debt. I noticed that you were saying that we had collected 284,000 in aged contributions, which is roughly halfway through the target for the year. Didn't quite understand how much of the, shall we say, the aged debt that is. Either I didn't see it or whatever. Is 284,000 50% of the whole outstanding debt, or is it 10%? Just wondering what sort of scale of a problem we've got. Debt for aged care, sorry.
Thank you. So it's about 20% of the age debt. So it was debt that was over a year old. So we did an exercise where we actually wrote off some of that debt that we felt that we weren't going to collect. And then we put some concerted effort into collecting. So we have already collected that. I think it was 284,000. There are some debts that are caught up in estates. So we are actively still pursuing those. So although it was about 20% that we collected, there are more, there's more in train from that. So we've not actually finished with that, but it's an exercise that we will have to keep up every year, because obviously every year there are debts that are turning over 12 months old. So, yeah.
It was just the fact that I had no understanding of the scale of the problem you were attacking and whether or not that was a big lump of it or a small lump of it. So it seems a reasonable.
It's a reasonable amount for age debt. But like I said, there are some quite sizable debts. So around, I think there's one that's 80,000 and 100,000 that are caught up with people who've passed away and their estates waiting for probate. So there will be more coming through from that particular cohort.
Thank you. Shall I go for things like John West House and the purchasing of a children's care home, and I'm just wondering whether or not we're financing that from our own SIL S106 monies, or if we're looking at outside investors and then, shall we say, operating the home.
Who wants to, that could go in a number of directions. Andrew, I saw you move your head, so you sort of drew my attention early.
Yeah. I want to say that John West House is part funded with some SIL contributions, but I need to check. Certainly there is an element of capital borrowing that was secured quite some time ago, actually, with that project. But I can come back to you if we were able to allocate any SIL to that particular project.
It is money of RBWM either borrowed or from reserves, rather than because I know at one stage we were looking at the model where we would potentially have somebody else buy the property, but we would operate the property. And I just wondered what happened to that model as a strategic sort of issue. Because one of the things which I keep hearing about is that the costs for looking after elderly people, children in care are very high. And I am led to believe that if we were to operate those properties ourselves, we would be, shall we say, cutting out an element of profit for somebody else. And if we could figure out a way of doing that, because I get approached by people who are interested in doing that, building the property and then effectively handing it over. It's also something that our pension fund, as I was unfortunately brought onto last time, has a fund where they are actually allowed to invest in local projects which generate an income of such. And examples which were given were elderly care homes, as well as light industrial units and anything else. I'm just wondering if we're not, if it's the wrong option, it's the wrong option. But if we've looked at it and found out it's the wrong option, that's the right process rather than just going, don't think it's for us.
Should we include that then in the follow-up? Andrew, if you're going to look into the funding of it, do you want to, or is there, okay.
I'm happy for a later answer because it's a really awkward question. It's
home perspective, that is a capital investment. We were very fortunate in the borough because we haven't had to build a children's home from scratch. This was a home that was already in situ. I've been to see it, perfect home for a children's home, really, really good. It's just needed a little bit of work to bring it up to standard. And the importance of us, if you like, owning it and running it is that we maintain, and I think it's really important, the focus on quality and cost. So yeah, you know, that's AFC will run that.
I'm just saying for future ones, bearing in mind we only have a limited amount of capital and a limited amount of borrowing ability, but we have income which we're presently giving to a third party. Maybe we could figure out a way of using that income more wisely by having somebody else just buy the home and rent it to us as a bareboat type charter thing. Because I've been approached by two people in my community who do that sort of thing. And I was, as I said, on the pension fund, that came up as an opportunity that they were looking for. And I would just like to be reassured that we would think about it.
Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree. We should look at all of the options for funding assets that we need to deliver our operations. One thing I will say about children's care is that there's quite a lot of evidence nationally that the prices that are being charged to local authorities by private sector companies running care homes and other facilities is actually very much higher than it needs to be, and they're generating a level of profit that seems in some cases excessive. One of the answers to that, of course, is for the public sector to start providing these things itself. And as you all know, we do have access to capital funding at rates that the private sector does not. So there are lots of reasons why it could be cheaper for us to provide these things ourselves. However, I do agree that we should do an option appraisal, look at all of the opportunities that are open to us, and then make sure we take the right one at the time.
Councillor Werner, did you still want to say anything on it?
From a sort of administration policy point of view, the children's home obviously is very much the way, it's a form of insourcing, and we've been very clear that we're really keen to bring stuff in-house when it makes sense to do so. And with the increasing costs in placements in children's homes and in adult services, it's a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest. Very much the direction we want to go. On the age debt, it is a huge age debt we've inherited. But of course, we, through the buying of our new system, which went live beginning of the year, Mosaic, it means that we're going to be, the council's going to be far more able to track the payments, to set up direct debits so people can pay on adult services automatically. So it's really using technology to improve the service we give to the residents while also improving the finances. So again, it's a win-win situation and very much along the sort of principles that we're looking to follow as a council.
Sorry, I've got two more. One of which is, I'm not too sure if I can get an answer. I'm looking at page 19 of the under environmental services. It basically comes about by a report from one of my residents about fly tipping. And I was a little surprised to find out that we're 100% reactive or positive, because it is one of the things where I am getting regular residents complaining about long periods of time where settees and all sorts of horrible things have been thrown at the side of the road and left. So I'd like to understand how we can say we're at 100% and what the, shall we say, the criteria are for saying that. Is it a week between notification and removal, a month, 6 months, just so I can then pass that message back on to people, because it is an issue which I had 2 or 3 instances in the first quarter of this year where people were giving me a hard time about it. So unfortunately, it goes around. Shall I hit you with the second one while you, or?
You want to have, yeah.
Can I just check whereabouts the fly tipping part was there? Which, yes, please, yeah. Sorry?
7 of 104 in the document that we're given. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. That one. Yeah. I just put number 57 at the top of the report. SCO1. SCO. Yeah. Do you look at it now? I think. Oh yes, SCO1. Yeah. Sorry. And while we're at it, the one below it, TIV 01, bearing in mind discussions which happened today. But again, those are the two things that in my ward I tend to get a lot of earache about. And when I saw we've performed 100%, I was a little bit dubious, but it depends.
Thanks. And also, yeah, where it is in the papers. So, I mean, it is based on those instances of fly tipping that's reported to us at the council, and then a response to those reported issues. So it is a fair observation that there might well be fly tipping that you or I see that hasn't been reported. This particular metric is based on a response to a report that's been received to then deal with some fly tipping. So I suppose it's a good question. It's a challenge back to us in many ways to think about that doesn't account for all of the fly tipping that we might see. It's based on reports. So there's a gap.
It's a criteria which is quite definite at 100%, and not wanting to be awkward about it. For the next quarter, I had several personal incidents where I put forward things. So I'm very much looking at 100% not being right next time. But I would also like to say that understanding the time period that we're actually working to would probably help manage my expectations a lot better. Because I think is a couple of weeks is enough, but maybe I'm completely out of the ballpark there of what we're measuring.
Yeah, we do have some particular metrics in terms of time of responding. In fact, I did bring up off our website not long ago because I had a similar question. But yeah, I mean, we're basing it on reports, and then the response to those reports having been actioned so those reports come from resident, councillor, anybody that enters a report using our reporting system, and then comes through to us and goes to the contractor to deal with the fly tipping. So that's where we are with this one. Like I say, there is a potential gap that not all fly tipping is being dealt with in terms of what we can see, because it is reliant on a report coming through.
Can I just, maybe someone would like to check the next quarter's figures, because I know it's not at 100%. And the second thing is the one below it on the grass cutting, is that in correspondence today, I was told somebody would find out the schedule for my grass cutting in my ward, which would then lead me to understand how can we know that the grass cutting is on schedule if we don't know what the schedule is. So I'm a little bit confused on that, and I don't need an answer now, but I just want to raise it as being something that if I start finding out that I doubt the figures in a report, then I need to ask questions about them. But also it starts making me doubt those figures, which I don't understand in the report. And then I start having to dig a little bit deeper into those. So I'm at the easy level at the moment. It's easy ones to pick on, but there's other ones where I have had far more detailed questions given to me, which potentially I don't understand yet. So I'm actually asking people to explain them to me. And that's about more things about aged care and things. So just want to leave it at that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price.
Thank you. I'd like to raise the homelessness and temporary housing. So this is consistently in the red and significantly so. So apart from the, I use the term humanitarian side to it, and all the long-term consequences of people being homeless or being in temporary accommodation, there's then the cost. So of all the actions that you are taking to try to reduce this, do you conclude that actually it's really out of our control to a large extent because of national factors? And if you say, no, there is more that we can do, and you could wave a magic wand on one thing, what is it that you say would actually make a significant difference?
I'd love to say there's just one thing to do, but I think it's a sort of a mix, a multitude of different actions that are needed. I think we're not doing absolutely everything we can do in this space. Yes, the national picture is sort of mirrored here at RBWM in terms of temporary accommodation continuing to rise, and that's the same issue everywhere in terms of lack of available stock within the private sector, or the same stock that many local authorities are bidding for, trying to get. Also, landlords taking themselves away from the sort of rental market as well, or looking to sell properties on. So there's a whole mix of things going against us there that we're up against. I think kind of going back to one of the earlier points in terms of what corporate ONS is sort of looking at, some of our resourcing sort of challenges within our services doesn't help. And I think we need to consider some further dedicated resource going into particular areas that can help to unblock where we can identify and source sort of private rented stock from. We don't really have any dedicated resources sort of working on that, on the phones, on the website, speaking to agents, trying to source accommodation. So resourcing is as you would have heard before, resourcing is a challenge for many services and directorates. Housing particularly, we've got about 15 vacancies across the wider service area at the moment. Some are filled with temporary members of staff, but that number ebbs and flows an awful lot. We've got some green shoots of things that we're progressing with. Well, we mentioned John West House a moment ago and St Edmunds that we talked about before, but also working with our registered providers as well to release some further property with them through a purchase and repair partnership that we're working with both Abri and Housing Solutions on. But I think if I could probably go on for quite a long time talking about this, about all the different little bits that we could do, but we've had some conversation at executive leadership team around perhaps us being a bit bolder in our investment into stock that whether we hold within our asset holding company going forwards, thinking about the right management resource that we would need to deliver those properties in terms of delivering the actual physical property, but then managing the properties going forwards. There's some really significant gains and opportunities in us looking at that. And we've now got a new arrangement within our property services team that's back within the authority with some greater control there, that we think that we could probably deliver more units and more properties that we could then use for temporary accommodation within the borough as well, which is again really important, similar to the points that Lynn was making about some of her challenges within children's, delivering local available accommodation facilities. It's the same for temporary accommodation. So don't have the exact kind of business case to sort of present to you now, but that we're looking at the potential for being bolder and maybe invest to save as part of our budget setting process that we've already kicked off. And we're working on that sort of as of now, all the way down the line into the back end of this year, ready for next financial year. So there's something there for us to look at, Councillor Price, as well as then all the other things that I mentioned, I think, within the paper, and I may have mentioned to you before.
To actually deliver any new initiatives is going to be really difficult because you're 15 people short. So you need people to deliver the initiatives and you need people to service what the current demand is. So is there anything more that could be done to try to recruit? Is it a matter of you don't have the money for it, or is it a matter of you can't have the market, or it's the pay scales are not right for the market?
It's some of that, for sure. So, areas of housing, highways, planning, speak to any of my Berkshire colleagues in their authorities, and we're all fighting for kind of a smallish pool of professionals within those distinct areas. So I think it's about how do we become more attractive, and there's different ways of us being able to do that, working with our HR colleagues and our recruitment specialists to sort of think about the campaigns and the approaches to our recruitment and how we can set ourselves apart from other authorities. Sometimes it does come down to pay, and we know with some of our roles we are slightly adrift with other benchmark salaries in other authorities quite close to us. So that's difficult when other authorities, our neighbouring authorities, might be offering more money for the same sort of role. But I think there is something, there's certainly some unique selling points about the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead, which we've got to try and get on the front foot with. And we've seen with a lot of our recruitment in lots of different areas of us bringing in some fantastic people over the recent time. But in housing, it's going to take a kind of concerted effort, and that's where we are speaking to our HR colleagues to carefully consider the approach that we're going to take to try and recruit to full-time roles. But as I say, we can get agency members of staff in there, but of course they cost more than so that's straight away putting a cost pressure on us, whilst needing to fill those vacancies as well. So it's a campaign and a piece of work that we're taking forwards.
Have we we talked before about temporary housing. I think we sort of hinted at the idea of place scrutiny having something on their work programme. I'm going to sort of slightly look at Mark here and see if anything's progressed on that. Have they got something set up yet?
Not at the moment, but I think we can explore that. We actually need to sit down and explore that a bit further.
Yeah, I just think if you're talking about putting a business plan together for that, I think that's the element where we can contribute to essentially a place scrutiny item, which will look at the delivery of the policy on temporary housing. I do like the idea of having more stock houses as well. That's sort of music to the ears. Okay, Councillor Price, have you got anything more? No, lovely. Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I've got
a handful of questions, most of them actually in the sort of children and education area. So shall just sort of back on through them. Okay. First question, and I'll refer to the council plan, the scorecards, which is the 24-page document. And on page 16, AFC2, target AFC2, the percentage of borough schools rated as good by Ofsted as good or outstanding. So that's at about 91% amber, and our target's 95%. It's obviously schools get rated only every now and then, and we know that targets change, and we know that it's good if we're finding if we're finding problems, and then they can be dealt with. But do we know how that performs? A simple question: how that performs roughly against the national picture? So 90.9 or 91%. What's the national picture there?
We are, if we compare ourselves to national, we are doing relatively well, but I don't have the details in front of me. So what I can do is go away and get that information for you and send it through. Very happy to do that. And I can say, as of last week, we have increased again because we've got a couple more schools go into the good bracket.
So that was a simple one. Another question is, if we go on to page 14 of that, and this is AFC 33. So this is about the percentage of fostered children placed with AFC carers. That's one of the red ones. We're at 50%. Versus 85%, which is our target. So we're some way below. Could you just explain that? What can we actually do, and what are we doing?
Yeah, answered that just a little while ago, I think, for Councillor Cross, but I'm very happy to go through that again. So there is no one silver bullet that will increase the number of our foster carers. So we are doing a range of things, because the bottom line is we've got to be competitive out there, because there are lots of fostering agencies across the country. In Berkshire, we've got to offer something that is different. So the things that we have looked at is our package of support for foster carers to make sure it's competitive. So you will know, Councillor, that relatively recently the council agreed to give foster carers council tax reimbursement. And that is competitive, because not all fostering agencies do that. So focusing on that element, I think, is really important. Focusing on the myth busting, you have to be in a heterosexual marriage to be a foster carer. You've got to be married. Our foster carers are from all areas of the community, and very, very different lifestyles and histories. And so that myth busting is really important. I think the other thing we talked about earlier on is having a really good, needs to be excellent communications plan. And we've been working very closely with Sophia and her team on that. So at Foster Care Fortnight, that's sort of launched our comms, and that will go on for the rest of the year. And there's all sorts of things tied into that, which has been really, really positive. We're also involved with the South East Regional Fostering Hub. So again, that's looking at a regional approach to recruitment and retention of foster carers. I would say it's still very early days in terms of how successful that is going to be in the South East region. I'm keeping a bit of a watching brief on that, but that's the other area that we're looking at. And I think one of the most important things, as I said earlier, is that we are focusing in on children's extended family. We have had additional capacity put into the teams, so we've got people who can look at, you know, are there aunts, are there uncles, are there cousins, are there extended family members out there who can care for children from within their family. So those are just a number of the things we are doing. And as I said, you know, I think that we can all talk in our communities about the benefits of fostering. As I said, I've got leaflets upstairs, we've got posters, we've got things that you can take out to speak to people in your area about the positives of fostering. So there is always more we can do. What I would say is that the work that we've been doing over the last couple of months is, touch wood, proving to be successful. We've got 3 new potential foster families going through the process, which is really positive, but we need more. And it's not just about recruiting them, it's about retaining our foster carers. We want our foster carers to have a really good experience of being a foster carer, and that means giving them really good support, because, you know, sometimes they can be dealing with very, very tricky situations.
Thank you. Actually, you've answered a couple of other questions you had, which is, and so I won't go over those because I think that's, it sounds like, if it sounds like we're sort of, you know, that what more can we do? That sort of, you know, what are other people doing? Are we seeing any successes? I think you've sort of answered that fairly comprehensively, but it sounds like we just need to keep plugging away until we get some success. Okay. There was the, it may well have been related on the transformation, the future shape transformation, the one red rated item, is that related? This is about connected care placements to increase mainstream foster carers. Is that, I mean, was this essentially about trying to make savings based on these things? Okay.
That's what I so that was based on having a net gain of foster carers, and we haven't been able to do that, which is why we're putting all of this work in train for the next year. You know, and I just add, this is not just a local issue for this area, it's a national issue, and I think we have to think nationally. We need to think differently about the profile of foster carers and what foster carers actually want, because, you know, I don't think it's good enough that we do what we've always done. I think we've got to think differently about what it is, you know, that foster carers want to be able to successfully foster children.
And one final question for you. And I promise the other questions, there's only a couple of other questions. Looking at AFC, so this page 15 of 24 to AFC 16, the number of children referred is actually, that's very green. That's we're sort of, it's actually lower than we were hoping, and actually on the main body of the report, I think in like 7.5 and 7.6, we say, oh yes, the rate of referrals is lower than last year, but children entering care are presenting with increasing complex needs, and this is something we've, I know, come back to many times. Councillor Werner might have sort of hinted at this actually, that this may be a question for you actually, but what can we do? Again, I know that there are things like building more children's homes, but what can we do? What can we do, and how quickly will or could those things have results? Sorry, that's a very, very broad question, but I deliberately so.
Yes, it is mental, and I could spend all night talking about it, but I won't. I think there are lots of things that we can do. You will probably know, I'm sure, that there are lots of social care reforms that are coming into place nationally in children's social care, and that's very much about raising the profile of kinship care, as I talked about earlier on. It's about keeping children with their families where that is possible. And one of the big areas is about prevention. And, you know, you will hear that, and rightly so, again and again and again. We need to get in and intervene early, not just in terms of years, but early in a family when difficulties are beginning to emerge. And that sense of prevention is really important. And we have a very good preventative early help support in place for our families within the borough, but there is more we can do. And in fact, we're having conversations at the moment with adult social care and public health about how we can work collaboratively, how we can work together to improve that preventative aspect of the work, because, you know, we would say that is the most important thing for families, because it's right to intervene early, but it's also good for the council, you know, and good for budget and all of those sorts of things.
I agree, but something like the Windsor Family Hub is therefore very, very important. Is that in your opinion?
I think all of our early help work is very important, and the Windsor Hub, yeah, for the Windsor area is one part of that. Absolutely.
If Chair, I've got one more question and one more point, okay, which are nothing to do. So just on adults, yes, okay, hello, yes. So I think I know the answer to this, but looking at the sort of the raw figures, when we look at there's the head count, and I can't remember where it is, there's the head count of the council, which is somewhere, really sorry, page 6, I think, of the 24. The big change, which if you're looking, if you knew nothing about RBWM and how many people are employed by RBWM, the number of people, the headcount seems to have gone up by about 100, and it's all in adult social care, which is obviously, as I understand, that's insourced, now, just again, just for, you know, from a, can you explain broadly the benefit to us of doing that, of insourcing this?
One of the things that we learned being in Optilis is that having different terms and conditions, very different terms and conditions to other local authorities, was a detriment in terms of trying to attract people. And one of the big things was that people didn't have the benefit of the local government pension scheme, and people didn't understand, looking externally from other local authorities, looking at Optilis, they didn't actually understand about their long-term security in terms of their continuous service being relevant still and carrying on still in Optilis. So that was one of the things that we found most difficult, was to recruit while our social care teams were in Optilis, and it was particularly around qualified social workers and senior social workers and approved mental health social workers. So one of the main reason in terms of bringing that management and assessment into RBWM was to put us on a more similar footing with other local authorities, so that we can compete for that same workforce. And so lots of terms and conditions in moving people from Optilis into RBWM have now been changed to RBWM terms and conditions, and that's a project that's still ongoing into this year as well. And so we have seen some successes in terms of our senior management team. We've been able to recruit to a deputy director. We've been successful in other senior management positions, and we're now working our way across the vacancies that are within the department. But apart from having control within the council as well, and having the DAS in the council, which is beneficial. But it was primarily around the workforce that was the benefit of moving. into RBWM.
That's the piece of the devil's advocate here on that one. So, okay, so I'm hearing that it's about attracting the right people and versus other councils, because otherwise, if we don't do it, then they might go elsewhere and then we will lose good people. Is there an expected cost saving in the long term or reduced risk or some other reasons why, from, if you like, sort of from the residents' perspective, why it's good?
Yes, so I think from a resident's perspective, in terms of the benefits of having a stable workforce. So it provides more continuity to the people who we support, in terms of training staff and providing that consistent level of service for people as well. Agency staff, we run a statutory service, so we have to maintain standards and we have to have social workers in place in order to assess people in a timely way and to put services in place. So the saving is not paying on agency staff, and that was contributing to the overspend. So our head count is within budget if we have had a stable workforce, and that's obviously what we're working towards. So yes, in terms of finances, but in terms of quality for people and consistency for people. And if you look at the complaints that we received last year, so 23-24, you'd find that a lot of those complaints are around communication and consistent communication between workers and individuals who need support. So that stable workforce would say, time, quality and money. So that's the benefits for the residents.
So there's quality side involved.
Absolutely.
Cost saving. All right. Okay. Maybe that. One final thing. Sorry, I know I've had a lot of time. It's actually just going back to these. Councillor Howard mentioned it, but perhaps this is anecdotal, but on the place on Tivoli, I've noticed more grass cutting, and so it is good that we're now, because that was something that was not good and has improved. So that's good to see. That was my only point. Thank you.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just hoping somebody can help me understand the Appendix D, actually, the Future Shape Transformation Project. I know this one for Stephen. So again, I was looking at this and I understand that this was kicked off about over a year ago and there were 40 projects identified and the savings to be achieved were nearly £740,000 for that when it was kicked off, I think in February of last year. So if I turn to the pack that we've got tonight, there's now 27 projects identified. So my first question is, where's the other 13? Maybe I've missed those somewhere along the line. And of those 27, the majority have no budget savings at all associated with them, or they're saying that saving budget is not applicable for the last fiscal year for 24-25. So my question is, where are we tracking against the 740,000 that was identified over a year ago as part of this transformation project? And of the 17 in the pack, of the 27 in the pack, it's not clear to me where these savings are going to be made, and where there are savings for 24-25, it's not clear in the pack. Have those been achieved? So I was just hoping for some clarity on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good question. So I think, without putting words into anyone's mouths, I think some of those transformation projects have become essentially BAU, like they've sort of gone into the business as usual kind of thing. So I think we have talked about that before, but in terms of some of the savings in this year and how these existing projects are going, is there anyone that wants to talk to that directly or can talk to that directly, or do we need to take that away and come back with a fuller explanation? Ian, first hand up.
So the way in which we have pursued the process of delivering savings is by identifying those savings through our budget assessment process. So although they might appear in the transformation programme, the programme is our way of tracking the activity that's happening in relation to the delivery of those savings. But the amounts that need to be delivered and our system for tracking the amounts that are being delivered, all of that is reported through the budget monitor. So we have a savings tracker that we publish during the course of the year that tells us where we are in relation to the delivery of those savings from a financial point of view. And so in order to understand the correlation that you're looking for, you'd need to look at the two things together. We can provide that for you if that would be helpful.
Stephen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that was kind of apparent to me when I joined the authority a couple of years ago was there wasn't a transformation program as such. So kind of transformation projects were happening within services, but there was no kind of program that was being scrutinised centrally at the officer level. So what the Future Shape program did was bring all that together. So, and not all transformation programs have budgets attached, because transformation isn't just about savings, it's also about kind of doing things differently. So a good example would be the Mosaic system in adult social care, which we needed to implement because it would provide a much better system for our colleagues. It doesn't have any kind of overt savings attached to it. So that's an example of a transformation program which we had to deliver. There was no real kind of central mechanism for scrutinising delivery of that program. So that's what the transformation program has done. As Ian has said, we now track those savings through the budget monitor. And then for this year, we've got a set of savings trackers. So for every decision that was made and every savings proposal that was agreed by council a few months ago, there is a savings tracker which we scrutinise every month at the Future Shape board, which I chair, which breaks down into quite granular detail the decision points that have to be made to deliver those savings. So I guess it's been a work in progress, because when I started there wasn't anything here. We've put something in place and we're continuing to refine it.
Lovely stuff. I think that then brings us to the end of our discussion on the QAR. So thanks for that. I suppose, just on reflection, I think in some cases we were sort of creeping a little bit closer to kind of operational stuff. So, and just a kind of reminder, just felt some of the questions tonight, they're definitely things I think you can pop across to officers in advance of meetings if it's a clarification point and stuff like that. Just keep things tighter in the meeting. But thanks everyone for your contributions. We will move on to something I'm quite excited about, not just because it's something that I've been involved with. I'm excited for that reason. But I think this is probably, in the sort of 2 and a bit years that I've been sat in this chair in this panel, this is probably the first time that we have had a policy document on its way to Cabinet getting scrutinised prior to being finalised, which I think is exactly what we're trying to achieve here. So it's taken us a while, but we got there in the end up. And, you know, that's partly me finding my feet, and maybe the panel, there was a lot of newbies in there as well. So all of us finding their feet a little bit, but also working really closely with officers on and dem services on timing, because timing's part of that as well. So we've got there. So I'm really pleased about that. And I think that will lead us nicely into the agenda item after this as well. So we're going to look at now the consultation policy that's been developed. We're going to be, Simon, you're going to introduce that for us, and then we'll hand over for a bit of an intro and open up to questions. So over to you, Councillor Werner.
Thank you very much. It is really exciting, Chris. You're quite right, because how we engage with the public is just so important for everything the council does. Getting it right is so important. In the past, I think consultations very much have been seen as tick box exercises, where a consultation goes out on the website and then people, let's face it, usually exactly the same people reply to the consultation. And it's led to some really poor and misleading results in various consultation. For instance, there was a consultation on something that would benefit young families. and not a single response from parents of involved in young families responded, but there was a lot of people of different age groups who the over 70s who replied. So we need to make sure we're engaging properly with the people that are affected by these. So consultations really need to be transformed into engagement exercises where we seek out the people affected by the changes that are being proposed by the consultation, seek out underrepresented groups. I mean, so often, for instance, in the bus consultations, we didn't really reach in and get to those underrepresented groups. I must say Helen achieved that in Dedworth, but that was exceptional. We really need to change the way this works. How many young people ever respond to surveys, even when it's an issue to do with young people? We need to change the way we're doing it. One exercise that I think we did do quite successfully in getting responses from across the spectrum was the council plan we were talking about in the earlier item. So we had discussions, briefings with councillors to get their opinions, but we also reached out to the Youth Council, the Girls Forum, schools, disability groups, businesses, civil society in general. We had workshops from all these sectors of the community. And as a result, I think the council plan is so much better than it would have been if we hadn't done that, if I had just sat in my ivory tower and made all the decisions. So really engaging with the public, with all those groups, is absolutely vital. It's the model we should be following. I'm sure there is loads of stuff that you can add into this policy so that we can get a really good policy going forward about consultations and how we engage with the public. And I'll now hand over to Sophia, who will go through some details. Ellen, I'll hand over to Ellen.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. So I wanted to talk about our approach to consultations and specifically a new consultation policy which we've drafted. So I just want to talk about the kind of purpose and the intention behind creating this policy. So at the moment we have an engagement framework, we also have a consultation guidance document, but by creating this policy, we're able to update our guidance around our approach to public consultations and to strengthen our approach as well, making sure that what we're saying we're doing is relevant, that it reflects best practice across the sector, and also that obviously it fulfills our legal requirements when it comes to consultation. Having it formalised as a policy also means that we can embed consultation more firmly within our decision-making processes. So it gives us more clarity in terms of what our expectations are, what the standards from the consultations that we put out. And enables us to support our colleagues to understand how to go about gathering information, how to use that information in our decisions that we're making and in the services that we're delivering for our residents. It also builds on the way that colleagues can work with the consultation panel. So we have a group of colleagues, which includes myself and other teams and officers who support on different aspects of planning and running consultations. And again, by kind of having these things set out as a policy, it gives our colleagues kind of clearer idea of kind of how to work with us, what the expectations are, and means that we can be more consistent as well in terms of the outputs around our consultations. And another major benefit that we're going to have by creating this as a policy is that we can have more transparency. So rather than something being an internal document that we're using ourselves, we'll have something that we can use for our residents, also for partners and other stakeholders to show kind of why, what consultation means to us, kind of why we're doing it, why we're asking the questions that we're asking, how we're using that, and how we're then feeding back to them as well. So what they can expect from us. I also just want to talk about the scope of this policy. So it applies specifically to public consultations carried out by the council, including those carried out by Achieving for Children. There are kind of different types of consultations. So some consultations are related to more operational matters. So things like traffic orders and planning applications, they may be subject to separate policies. This is more focused on kind of strategic consultations designed to kind of shape our policies and our plans. And these types of consultations normally happen relatively far along in the process when the plans and proposals have been kind of relatively well defined and we're able to present them to the public and to our other stakeholders for comment and for feedback and for their insights as well. And also importantly, when we're still at a stage where that feedback and those insights can inform the final shaping of those proposals and plans and the subsequent decisions that kind of come out of those consultations. Obviously, consultation is only kind of one form of engagement. There are, many types of different methods of engagement and different types of engagements that may be used at different stages along a single kind of process or a single kind of planning exercise. Engagement normally, in any project, before you get to the consultation stage, there will have been other points of engagement. So early engagement exercises, maybe things like surveys to kind of build insight, to kind of help shape that early kind of shaping of proposals and ideas. That type of engagement and those type of surveys aren't covered by this policy. It is just those ones towards the end that feed more directly into the decision-making process. However, those other types of engagement would still be expected to comply with the engagement framework that we have at the moment. And also, one of the deliverables that we have in the council plan is the development of a communications and engagement strategy. So that again will give us an opportunity to we want to kind of refine our approach around particular other types of consultation, particular types of engagement. We'll be able to do that in that strategy as well, and look at how we're applying a kind of similar degree of focus to different types of engagements. I won't go through the kind of all the content of the policy. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a look through, but unless Sophia's got any points to add, then I'm happy to open to any questions or comments.
Let's open to questions and comments then. Councillor Price.
Press, I always forget, do I press it? I'm on. Thank you. I really welcome this because there have been flaws with the consultation in the past. So my comments are trying to improve the policy. So it's taken in that spirit. I have found in the past when we have had one of our providers doing a consultation, it has been really difficult to find that and for that to go out to that cohort. So I really welcome anything that we do to try to get those consultations, which I think will now be AFC, just seen as seamless and a part of the RBWM. But I felt the wording in this was a bit weak. It was saying, well, they should do what we do. And I think, no, they must do what they must follow this practice, not they'll follow their practice and hopefully it'll be. So I didn't feel that was strongly enough worded. So I think if that could be looked at again on page 97, just to make sure that is what you intend. They will do what our policy says. Then on page, I think it's paragraph 633. It was talking, and I just don't understand this bit. It was saying that if responses are by emails, they must be included. And then the next sentence says, but it can be the discretion of somebody whether they're included or not. And I thought both can't be right. So I wonder if you could just look at what that means. And then another point was actually trying to get hold of people who are not on the internet, which is partly what Simon alluded to. I feel just to say, oh, well, we'll tell them that they can go to the library. But how do you tell people they can go to the library if you're telling them on the internet or through social media, because they won't read that? So there are lots of other ways, and it's more difficult. But the library, for example, delivers library books to people who are in isolation. So they could include with that a leaflet on a consultation that could be relevant to them. So there are ways, but it's thinking outside the box of what we've done before. And there are organisations, if we're talking about people who are not on the internet, the elderly, that work with the elderly and support the elderly. If we told them there was a consultation, we could do that, or we can tell the faith groups there are consultations and they can distribute. So I think there is more positively that we should insist that people do to reach out to them. And then I'd just like to understand that this was discussed several months ago at the Disability and Inclusion Forum, and there was a long discussion there. And I want to ensure that all the points that they were raising have been included, because I couldn't see them overtly in here. And so I just ask, could you look back at those discussions and what was raised to make sure that they're reflected in the policy document? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Price. I think, yes, really good points. I will kind of go back and check if I need to, adding anything else in that the disability inclusion form raised. On the point about the email, I'll double check the wording. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that sometimes people will say, fill out the survey or email us. If we're saying that people can that, then we must consider if someone emails a response, that counts as a consultation response. If we haven't said email, we've given them alternative ways to provide a formal consultation response, then it's up to the Office of the Service to include it if they think it kind of adds to it or not. Just to try and make sure that we're not missing out on things, we're not being ambiguous in terms of someone saying, well, I didn't see my feedback reflecting what you did, but they've gone through not the channel that we were expecting responses to come through. So it's just trying to kind of close that off slightly. I think, yeah, some very important points about inclusiveness when it comes to consultations. One thing we do have now is that we've got standardised demographic questions that we ask them, because now we have also more oversight kind of with the consultation panel. We've got more oversight of our engagement platform. So we can actually look and see, you know, who is answering, kind of what cohorts are we missing, and then kind of use that to target a little bit more. And this is kind of trying as well to encourage people to, during the course of a consultation, look at who they're hearing from, look at who they're not hearing from, and then try and, if we need to do more targeted things, if we need to think outside the box, do, you know, kind of go out to people, go to meetings, kind of, yeah, make sure that we're hearing from the people who kind of, whose voices we really need to hear from, to make sure that we're getting a kind of, you know, the responses that we need.
Lovely stuff. Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is really good. I think this is a really good process. It's good. It's clear, and it's really, I think, an improvement to have something just written down, as in this is the process we follow. I have, I suppose, just two questions really. I've got very little to add. Before, and it's more about, yes, I'm happy with the in between, how the nuts and bolts of the consultation, that looks perfectly reasonable. Before the consultation, as in what gives rise to this consultation, can I just check there? I sort of agree with Councillor Price in terms of some of the language is quite vague. There was one, I think, that said, for example, where was it? It is, I'm sorry, I did highlight it. Yes, you must involve the panel and the relevant cabinet member. If the consultation relates to a specific wards, it is also best practice to inform the ward councillors. I suppose that question is, are there circumstances when you might not do that? For example, or, well, let me just leave that question there. Let's answer that question.
The wording, I think the point we're trying to make on that is in terms of kind of sign off and whose approval is needed, that kind of sits with the lead member, whoever holds that portfolio. But obviously the ward councillor also needs to kind of be involved, to be part of that, you know, making sure that we are reaching the people within that ward that we need to be promoting it, to have fed into the development of it as well. But it was trying to kind of get a little bit of that distinction between where the kind of sign off lay.
So that's clear, thank you. I think that's clear, yes. I mean, as I said, I think this is really, really good. The next question, though, is about, I suppose, at the other end. So we've done the consultation and we've got the results. Now, I'm going to use an example here, and it's a worked example, because there was a particular consultation that happened, which was the variation to PSPO for cycling, and part of this was related to our ward, so Pescod Street in Windsor. Now, when you looked at the responses, it's interesting when you split out the responses demographically, and when you split out versus the going back to the who, including the statutory people that you'd expect to consult, for example, Cycling UK, for example, Windsor Cycle Hub. Oh yes, very much in favour of this, very much in favour of it. But there was a large number of people who were clearly had clearly been lobbied to try to campaign against this, and that is always going to be a risk. That of course you're trying to do something, you want a genuine consultation, you want to genuinely find out, well, look, who's going to be affected by this, what does this mean? But there is a risk that, how can I say, opponents or certain people with an implacable interest might try to skew the results, as I believe happened here. And I did find it sort of slightly ironic that at the very same time that this happened, where there's all this threat about, oh no, there might be a cyclist on Pescod Street. And I think literally just the other week, a lorry, there was a near miss with a lorry and a young person, and there was not a near miss but a hit between a lorry and a piece of street furniture, which was absolutely disgusting. And I don't know if we've ever found out who it is, but just highlighting just the skewed sort of risk aversion there. Sorry, I'm digressing something, but there is a balance to be had. But can you just describe how you will take into account all of these things, the risk that it might be nobbled, as it were, versus you do want to get a right, you do want to listen to genuine needs and genuine concerns and interests?
I mean, I think obviously all kind of, that'll come down to the specific topic and the area and the different groups which may be involved. I think it's something where the knowledge of the service and the team, the officers which are running the consultation, really kind of comes into in terms of understanding how to weight different concerns. It's not like we are, not suggesting that people just take the numbers completely kind of as they are, and that's what we do. But it's, it's not a referendum that we just say from however much percent whichever way we're using the demographic information that we've got, the more kind of nuanced information in terms of any kind of comments that people give to understand kind of the full context of the information that we're getting. And then, it is kind of interpreted, and we will, it feeds into kind of decisions. I mean, also at the moment, it's because there are some consultations where we do have relatively low responses. I mean, generally we don't have huge numbers, but especially that does mean that it is potentially easier to, if one side goes in kind of particularly heavy, then it can potentially do that. But it means, people are aware and will probably look out for if they're aware of kind of this particular kind of local interest in a topic. But it's also, again, another motivation to push our consultations more, to do more, to make sure that we're being inclusive, that we're hearing from people that we're not hearing from already. And yeah, kind of really make sure that we're, with the information we've got about who's responding, try and make them as representative as we can do, and kind of take the responses that we get kind of within the right context.
Just to add to that, and I did talk earlier on about wearing a couple of hats in this discussion. I think one of the things that when Ellen and I have been looking at consultations and looking at how they can be improved and stuff, one of the things is that a consultation is one data source, amongst a series of data sources, some of which might be very objective revenue data or, footfall data or whatever it might be. So it's kind of making sure that when decision makers have got all that data in front of them, the consultation forms part of that. Equally, they will look at the demographic information and go, hold on, we're not comfortable putting all our eggs in this decision basket if it's been, if it looks like it's not representative. So good, lovely stuff. Thank you, Councillor Teasey. Councillor Howard.
I don't find much that I would change about it at all. The thing which I do come out of it thinking is that effectively we're creating a data source, records about our residents, trying to understand what motivates them, what they like, what they don't like. I think the next stage, once you have this policy, is how you start to compile that information and bring it together. Effectively, a CRM type system would be something where you're trying to compile people's interest areas into groups, which then allows you further down the line to suddenly, all the people who seem to be interested in cycling get a lot of cycling questions. All the people with lots of kids get lots of kids type questions, all the pensioners. And I think that's the stage where I'm starting to look at, and probably goes into some of the transformation discussions we're having as well, about how do we as a council communicate with our residents. And it dawned on me just now actually is that I get a lot of paper from RBWM. I get council tax notices, I get things on, you're the people who keep my postman happy, basically. My electricity bill, my gas bill, every other bill, everything else comes by email or by app. And once you start putting it online like that, it becomes free. So you can consult with me as much as you like, and it's really the price of your finger which you're paying for, rather than the paper, the postage, the admin and everything else. So what I'd be urging you to do, and looking at projects of how to electrify, that's the wrong word, computerize, digitalize, whatever it is, to bring us online, because that way it's quicker, it's cheaper, it's easier. You can cross-reference all the data sources that start to come back, and you start to build up a picture of our borough, which we don't have now. As you said, is some of our responses to consultations are small, possibly non-existent in some cases. And that's not really fair, because really you only get the very, very passionate, either for or against, who actually come out and say anything. The 90% in the middle just carry on. Yet those people are the people that really we need to take with us. The passionate at each end will make their own way. So I would really love to see the second stage of this, of how we start to understand and build a picture up of our residents almost individually, so that we can actually meet their expectations almost individually. So thank you for doing this. It's a good first step.
Thank you. If I could just kind of talk to the kind of plans around the second step that you mentioned. So at the moment, yeah, on the platform, we don't normally ask people to kind of register to fill in a consultation, to try and keep open so people who don't want to necessarily register don't have to. So although we're obviously collecting data, it's not linked to individuals, we kind of can't go back and look at that. But what we are planning on doing and started looking into is developing a residents panel. So that will essentially be a list of people that people can sign up to hear about all of our consultations. So we can, advertise that. We can use, we might be able to use, the people who've already registered and been involved in our consultations on the system already. Use the type of things that you've talked about, all the things that we send out to let people know that they can sign up to this. And then have a way of, we can ask people the topics. It's something other councils do. I'm signed up to my local council one. What topics are they interested in? And then we can send things that relate to that to those people. And like you say, try and just make sure people are aware they can't miss something because they happen to miss one, kind of one residence user or something. Just make sure people are aware of all the opportunities that we've got for them to have a voice and tell us what they think. So we're in the kind of early stages of scoping out what that's going to look like and how that will work. But that is the plan on the kind of the next step of this to really drive our consultations.
Please don't be shy in asking people if they want to do it, because the vast majority of questionnaires I fill in basically ask me if I wish to opt out as opposed to opt in. And very rarely do I bother to even tick one or two of them. So I know it's an ethical issue, possibly, but at the same time, we can be upfront and still favour our hope for outcome, which is to learn more about our residents. The only other question was, how far can we go along about cross-referencing our various databases? Because obviously we have children and aged care databases, we have place type databases, we have the council tax database. There must be several in there where there's Chinese walls between them not to allow you to go over them. Or have we not got that far?
I don't know, because I only look at the the engagement platform. I don't have insight into kind of the other our other kind of data sources. And that's probably a bigger question in terms of what we do with data at the council. But it is something that I've started looking at, kind of pulling off the data that we've got from past consultations to try and look kind of partly as well at how we can use that platform more strategically as well, to understand where people are engaging. Like you know, you said there's somewhere where people don't really engage. Can we tell where people haven't engaged, what we missed, that people haven't wanted to tell us what they thought about whatever it is? And can we use the ones where we can see people were interested and people told us what they thought to get more responses and get more engagement the next time we need to hear from people? So, you know, there's ways that we can use the data we've got on the engagement platform better. But yeah, I don't know about anything else.
Right. I think this is a really good step. I think is that the idea we need to actually think a little bit bigger out of the box about the infrastructure that we need to use to make this happen, and not to be shy about going the whole hog. Can you imagine how powerful and how easy it would have been to notify people about a bridge closure which was happening in Cookham, which we knew was going to happen, but we had people going out, we had leaflets going out. If we had all their email addresses, we could have done it every day for free. But instead it cost us thousands just to make people aware of something. The savings are there. I think we need to look at it in a more organisationally holistic way.
On that, I think we've got a developed comms and engagement strategy on there and the council plan, which I suspect we'll talk more to that than the consultation policy. Did you want to, follow up on that?
I think there are huge strides we can make in automating a lot of the stuff we do at the council. There's big savings to be made and big improvements to the way we interact with the public. I mean, in the previous item, you were talking about fly tipping reports. Well, improving the system for how we can report fly tipping would actually, you know, make that figure more accurate and improve that service. So automating, absolutely. We're sort of developing a plan at the moment to really look at the website and how we do that, automate. We also do need to consider that I think it was 19% of residents specifically said they don't want to interact with us on the computer, that they want to use the phone, they want to come into the customer service centre. So we've got to make sure we're never excluding a whole group of people by automating, but certainly automating it is a fantastic way to improve our interactions while also you know, saving money, and the consultation strategy and policy will very much follow those lines. I like the idea of the council tax bills, but on the internet, by the way. But that's not really a consultation.
Very good point there. 19% don't want to go on the computer. 80% of them do. If you can reduce any cost to an organisation by 80%, you should be taking it.
Absolutely.
Just any. So I really look forward to seeing somebody just sending me an email and telling me how much my council tax is next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Da Costa, thanks for being patient.
The chair, policy, we love it. And that's what we're here for, right? To just reflect Councillor Price's comments also, that I'm going to look at this through 3 different lenses. And please take this in the spirit it's intended to help this council be better, always, okay? Never a criticism, it's just trying to be constructive and obviously take on board what you want and get rid of what you don't. So I want to start off, I won't go through the usual stuff about how important consultations are. I just want to read you a couple of things. So this is from Systems Thinking, that consultation is a feedback mechanism in complex systems that must be adaptive and contextual. We look at administrative law and citizen participation. Consultation must empower, not extract. Equity and cultural respect are central. So it goes back to democracy. We look at stakeholder theory. We can look at consultation must allow genuine dialogue, not just feedback. And heuristics and biases and human judgment. People need time, context, and emotional connection to make good decisions and to also connect with the council. That's one lens. Second lens is this, and I would say that I would like to see in a policy much more volume, and this is what I'm thinking about. When we look at the LGA's guidance, that's 176 pages. We've got 6 here. And there's some really, really valuable stuff in the LGA guidance, which we don't really explore. For example, Councillor Werner mentioned, the Tower of Babel style council. Well, where are we? What do residents think of who we are? Are we a PLC, where everything comes from the top? Are we a Tower of Babel where nobody gets to make the decision and we never connect with people? Are we navel gazing, or are we more of a networked council? And what the reason we have to ask that question is, if we know what other people think of us, then we can decide, well, where do we want to move to? We might think we're fantastic, but the residents think we're pants, poop, and actually we need to move along that in a more constructive manner. So, again, this is all part of the LGA guidance on setting up your policy. I would like to see some sort of consultation so we know how we are rated, to go back to Councillor Howard's comment, not how we rate others, but how they rate us, and then plan some course of action. We look at, it'd be great to see the options set out to, when do we engage or consult or do something else? What are the use conditions for each of those options? And we look at the medium and channel, again, what tools are available to us today and what do we need to develop as a plan for resourcing? Because clearly, if we want to improve our consultation, we need to be clear what resources we haven't got, and what we can't afford. That might be a key deciding factor, that we go more of a tick box exercise than the deep dive consultation, where we allow residents to participate and make informed decisions with us, rather than you can choose where you choose. Heathrow is the classic example. Not, do you want a third runway? Should it be here or Gatwick? But where would you like your third runway? Closer to Langley or further away from Langley? Do you see what I'm saying in terms of the way you frame consultations and policies? So I think a lot of these things should be reflected in what we're looking at. I mean, I could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I won't, because we've got limited time. So I just want to go back to a couple of final points then, 2 or 3 final points. And obviously a key aspect of this would be, as a manual, almost as a policy manual, will be training for officers so they know when to use a decision tree, if you like, each of those different scenarios, and what, again, we need to develop and what we haven't got. And also, we've talked about what resources we need to develop, and what, almost like re-engineering. I would love to see this council be re-engineered so that we almost become a superorganism. I say superorganism because I'm a beekeeper. And so we have such a deep engagement with residents that they almost help us to give us all the answers. That'd be fantastic. It's wishful thinking, but hey, you can hope. But going back to the final lens, which is this, when it comes to consultations, one of the criticisms I often hear from residents is that it is the Heathrow approach. Where do you want your third runway? Not do we need one? What are the key factors? What are the trade-offs? So really, education and that informed choice somehow need to be reflected in our policy, saying we want to do that. Maybe we don't, and that's okay. I'm not pointing you, sir, but you mentioned it, an ivory tower process. If that's what we want to be, that's okay. Be clear, let residents know this is what we are, because we can't afford anything else. So we're again looking at the informed choice, just understanding how we provide balanced information, how we clarify the context and the trade-offs. In what scenarios do we do that, and in what scenarios it's completely not appropriate? It's just a simple going through the borough local process. Yes, no at this point, but at this stage here, early in the process, you've got many more options that you can consider and bring people along with you. I'm going to stop there. So just to point out that, it'd be great to see this developed into something more substantial as a policies document, which also sets out where we're trying to get to as a council. But that means some self-recognition or recognition from residents as to where they think we are, rather than where we think we are. And I mean that sincerely, because I'm part of this. Thank you.
Councillor Werner?
Yeah, thank you, Wisdom. I think having read the policy, I think we cover most of what you're talking about, and I thank you for your sort of recommending the policy that it's covering all those three lenses. I think it's absolutely so important that we have an interaction with the public, that it's not just give us your information. It's about a conversation, and really that's where the whole engagement side of it comes in. You know, it's so important to not just shout questions at people, but to really engage in the conversation. And that's why a number of those parts to the policy are included to really create that engagement. So thank you for your comments, really appreciate it, and thanks for your support.
Yeah.
I think I said that these things are not really reflected, and I would expect more depth in the policy, looking at these different options and issues. At the moment, we have a skeleton which could mean anything, but it has no bones on. I'd want to see more on that, is what I said.
Thank you, yes, just to kind of reassure you in terms of the substance of it. So the policy is only one part of a kind of suite of documents that we have to support our consultation and engagement approach more widely. I think there's definitely, you know, I want this to be something, or we want this to be something which people kind of look at and use, and there's absolutely value in having a kind of big, you know, really substantial kind of, you know, piece of kind of documentation like the LGAs, which goes into obviously lots of detail, but this needs to be something which people kind of can look at and know what's expected of them, what the kind of really important criteria are for, you know, ourselves internally, but also for the public, for people who are looking at this and want to just go, I've responded to this consultation. When am I going to know what's happened? What are they doing with this information? Like, what stage of the process are they if they've asked me for my views? So I think that's why we've tried to keep it as concise as it needs to be to get the kind of key points across. We do have the engagement framework, which I referenced, which we have as an internal document, and that does go through. So we've got the ladder of participation there, the ladder of engagement, which may be a model that you may be familiar with. And so that kind of goes through how to identify what stage of that you're at. Are you informing? Are you involving? Are you collaborating? What different methods you might want to consider with different forms of engagement. So we do have another piece which kind of goes into that kind of more detail beyond consultation about kind of other types of engagement that people might want to use. And then we've also got kind of other documentation that kind of go alongside it around, like I said, the kind of demographic questions, responding to consultations, how to kind of feed back on your results. So it's a kind of suite of, it's a kind of, designed as a toolkit really, that people can go in and use the kind of key bits that they want to actually kind of put their consultation into action.
That's what useful to hear, so I was wondering if the document that's being presented should refer to those and actually include them, you know, almost like the borough local plan, supplementary planning documents, so that we're clear as to how we move and navigate through those different aspects. It could be that some of those documents are living documents and they get updated, but that's okay as long as we're clear. My view would be that would be useful for people to see. Because then they know it's not just this, and actually this could mean anything, and yet it could be nothing. That'd be useful. That's my view anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to that, I mean, when I spoke, this was part chair role, part consultation champion role. We had a conversation about policy in the toolkit. My view is that this isn't the room to have a toolkit and picked apart. I mean, I'm sure if councillors want to look at a toolkit, and you know, then they can get access to it. But I think the thing is here, we're here to influence and change and impact policy, right? You know, not look at every single operational detail that goes through, and ensure it's, you know, that there's mechanisms, there's a management team to do that, frankly. I think what's good about this consultation is that it's clear about when this comes into effect and when it doesn't. So this is about official consultations, whether there's a statutory requirement for consultations, which is different to popping a survey out and finding out what people think. I would expect to see that in the engagement strategy, because that's about engagement. And one of the things that Ellen and I talk about is sort of early contact, early engagement. There isn't a consultation, but might be a, let's have a think about this. And you know, we're sort of heading in a direction. We just want to gather some insights But, you know, again, 160 pages of LGA document to reinforce Ellen's point. We want people to read this as well and engage with it. So I take your point, but it's also about what audience you're putting this out for as well. So I wouldn't be that keen to see operational toolkits coming into this meeting, but I'm sure if councillors want to see them, be reassured that they'll be available.
Okay. It's for providing clarity for the sake of residents. If these things are clearly referenced and if you like hyperlinked to say, look, these are, if you like, listed. So we're residents and councils are clear as to this is the skeleton and then this is how you get the flesh on the bones. Okay, now I get where we're going to.
Okay, but I think that there is sort of signposting in the document 2 toolkits, albeit they'll be on an intranet, which is kind of an appropriate place for it.
So we talk about them. We don't link to them because they're internal documents. So people accessing the website wouldn't be able to access our internal system, but we talk about it and we, in terms of how we are supporting colleagues across the organisation to ensure that they know the steps to take for consultation. But it wouldn't make sense to hyperlink to them. Yeah, no, it's helpful.
Non-intranet, but as a document, this is the latest version and it's on the public side of that. That would be useful. So I'm saying.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. I know personally, I love getting succinct documents. They're easy to read, makes a nice change from some of the other documents that are sent across. So I welcome this. Just very briefly, when I've spoken to residents in my ward and residents associations, the one thing they always say about consultations is it's a bit like buses, you know, sort of 10 come along at once and then there's none. So my one question would be, could we somehow stagger these so they're more impactful when they do arrive, whatever way they do arrive, so that we hopefully do get more engagement then. And then I can say to my residents, there is a consultation now about X, go and have a look at it. And they don't go on the system and see 10 consultations or whatever and get lost and switch off. So that would be my only ask, if there is somehow we can stagger that and only have so many consultations per month or whatever. So thank you.
Work that Ellen and the team have been doing is actually on a forward tracker of consultation, which for that very objective, which is we don't want conflicting consultations. We don't want to go out to the same people and ask them 3 different things and all those things, and looking for where timing allows that we can actually package some of that, so that if we are speaking to a certain group, we can utilise it to speak to Councillor Howard's point, making sure that we're utilising groups properly to get proper views from them about a number of things. So yes, so we're building that with colleagues across the organisation.
Lovely stuff. No further questions or comments. I'm just going to say something because I know there'll be too professional to say it themselves, but the amount of work that's gone into this behind the scenes over the last 2 years has been phenomenal, really. And I remember being stood on Councillor Werner's driveway prior to May 2023 and saying to him, we need to get hold of these consultations because we need to do better. And then 2 weeks later, I've read in the paper I was a consultation champion, so which was great news. But I've been working really closely with Ellen on a lot of different aspects of it, whether it's how we design questions, you know, how we design consultations, and then all this work that her and the team have put into the policy. So thank you for the efforts there. It makes a real difference. And there's always more we can do, of course. So I can't imagine this will be it set in stone. So thanks a lot. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. So that brings us on to work programme. Now, again, I talked about being excited earlier on, and this is twice I'm going to talk about being excited looking at an agenda item in corporate overview and scrutiny, because normally we are looking at the yard arm and wondering if we're all going to get out of this room within 3 hours, and we get to work programme, we rattle through it real quick, and then we head off. But we've actually got some time to look at work programme, and I think it's right that we do spend some time talking about it. I've been working with Mark and the team in democratic services. I've been taking advice from officers, from members, and sort of looking at how we do scrutiny better. And I sort of hinted at this a couple of meetings ago. But I think today that consultation discussion is exactly where we want to end up. You know, we want to see policies being developed whilst they're still being developed so that we can contribute to it. We've got some notes that we can pass on to Cabinet when they're considering the consultation policy, and there's more that we can do. So I sent a note out again for the benefit of those who aren't on the panel. I sent a note out to panel members, again, probably an old distribution list, but saying that when we talk about work programmes, what we've tried to do is clear the deck slightly. I think there's a question on how we can usefully use things like the QAR in the future. So I'm talking to officers about how we do that more usefully. There are elements that are kind of seasonal. So we will look at the budget, we will look at the council plan when it comes around. So there's elements of that that we've baked into the work programme, but we've also created a bit of space to allow us to do more of what we've just done. So what I suggested and what I want to open up the conversation to is that we look at the council plan. The council plan has got a series of priorities laid out of it. It's got a series of deliverables laid out in front of it. And some of these are talking about developing strategies and or policies, and they have timeframes against them. So what I would like this conversation about work programmes to be about is to focus on elements that we have seen in that council plan that we think sit in this room. And I think that's really important as well. So it's things around HR, finance, IT, data, all those things. What we think are in there, we'll have a brief conversation about them. I don't want to get into loads of detail about them specifically, but let's get a working list together so that I can then work with Mark and the team to see what makes sense, what do we think meets that criteria, but also look at timings so that we can start going, actually, that's due to go to cabinet and that month we can make sure it comes into corporate the month prior, so we can start mapping these things out and doing things a bit more systematically. All right, so with that, and first off the blocks, I'm not surprised, is Councillor Price. So, oh, Stephen pops out. Sorry, Councillor Price. I'm just going to bring Stephen in quickly as well, because he might want to add to that, and then we'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, two that kind of spring to mind straight away are we're developing a new workforce strategy, or what we're going to be calling a people strategy. Don't have the precise timings, but it probably won't be until later in the year. But I think that is something that would definitely fall in the remit of this committee. The other one, which is in the council plan, is we're developing a social value policy. And again, I think that would come through here. So as well as the items you've listed, Chris, it's sort of cross-cutting policies such as that.
It was the social value policy and the workforce strategy, which are two that I had on my list as well, Stephen. So those two have got off to a good start. And I suspect there's going to be a third vote on the social value. So Councillor Price.
Thank you. What I'd like, if the projects are of a sufficient duration, is that we don't wait to look at the very, very final, but maybe we could have an input part way through. And until we know what the implementation timetable is for each project, we don't know when that will be a good time to do it. So that's a general thing. I looked at the aims in the council plan, and I really concentrated on aims 1 and 5. So in aim 1, there was the report it function, which is 1.3, which is something that we desperately need to look at. And I thought the 1.5, the advertising and sponsorship policy. And again, this depends if there's time for us to do it with their programme or when they're implementing it. And then in aim 5, communications engagement, which I think is 5.1. And then something that I now can't read, which is 5.1, or something, but I'm not sure what that is, but you can look that up. And then the other two you've said, but I also felt there's something outside the council plan that we decided at council that we would look at the what had happened with the finances. And I thought that perhaps we should look at how that is progressing. That's not a policy as such, but I think that is so important that I would like to make sure that we look at how that's going, rather than we just end up with a document that goes to council.
Agree. And on that, I did have the briefest of conversations with Ian on the way through. So we're looking at that. And I think generally we're saying that makes sense. We're just going to work out the details and the timing. But yeah, so we expect so just to remind members of the panel, I did dig this, where did it go? I dug this up earlier on. Essentially, this was an action from the last council meeting, which was on 23rd of April, which was to look at the various SIPFA reports that have already happened, bring it into a bit of a summary and an update, which was an amendment to the motion that was put forward at that council. So what we're saying here is that we'll get that into this panel. Part of the reason I think that's important as well is that documents like that are very difficult to discuss at council meetings. It's more of a kind of series of statements about it. You don't get to go back and forth and really get into the detail. And I think that's going to be important. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity as well. So thanks, Councillor Price, for bringing that up as well. I'm keeping a bit of a score on some of the ones that I've got here as well. So we're doing all right on those. Let's go to Councillor Howard.
The thing which I find myself struggling with a lot of the time when I listen to everyone here is an overarching strategy. The infrastructure we need to have inside RBWM, the updates of technology, the updates of the vision of how this council will run in 5 to 10 years or even 15 years' time. What do we see a good council being in 10 years' time? And what stepping stones do we need to take now so that we don't have to do things, bin it, do it again, bin it again, and go forward. So things that we look at being visionary and strategic and corporate in nature about where are we going and is it worth getting there? And when I actually look at the council plan, I mean, I'm looking here and I understand it. I've written these as well. But what I'm missing is that second level between, there was one statement there, put the council on a stronger financial footing. Using computers and IT to do that was one of the subsection. I'd like to know what is our vision. Computers are a big subject. Are we looking at CRM systems? Are we looking at automated invoicing? Are we looking at putting out apps which will do things like the NHS app, where I can see all my records that you hold? Where is this vision coming from? Because at the moment I get, being brutal, the one-step vision. I really want to know where I'm going to be living in 10 years' time, and is it worth to sort of hang around in Maidenhead for this future? Or should I go to another place where it's far more embracing of a future technology and how I would want to live? And being brutal about it, I don't really, when things are going well, want RBWM in my life. I can look after my life. What I want to know is that there's a council out there that when something goes wrong in my life, you're easy, quick to communicate with, it works, and it does it the first time without me having to ask 25 times. And at the moment, I feel we're on that track. How we put that forward as a business case for something to look at, I don't know, but maybe we need to look at what is the real fundamental 10-year visionary plan of how this council will work in 10 years' time. Because at the moment it's a bit vague. Or maybe that's just what we're being shared with. Maybe there is a fantastic super plan in the background.
I'm sure there is a fantastic super plan. I suspect the answer is it's a combination of a few things as well. Council plan, workforce strategy, digital strategy. It's about how it all hangs together. But Stephen, did you want to, because I guess you guys must talk about this a fair bit.
Yeah, it's absolutely the right question to be asking, I think, because I think the last couple of years have been very much uncovering and discovering the full extent of the council's financial challenges and putting in place, short-term responses to that. And that's where we've been for the last 2 years. I think you're absolutely right that we need to be looking ahead on a longer-term vision as part of a longer time scale. So don't quite have next steps yet, but I have been working on, and I need to find a better title of it, but a kind of future target operating model for the authority, which picks up a lot of the things you've discussed at a very high level at this stage, because it's an early piece of work. So I'll need to work out what we do next with that, but at some point I would like to put it in the member arena. So can you, I think you're making the right point, Councillor Howard, and if you can, I'll go away from this meeting and think about how the best way, and speak to the leader, the best way of kind of putting that into the member domain at an early stage, because I'd welcome member thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Teasey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I really concur with the idea that we should be looking at policies and ideally before upfront rather than so that we can influence them, so that we can say, well, hang on, have you thought of this? And then before it gets too far down the line, because hopefully that's what we're here to do, to try and improve things. I think I can't remember who said it. Was it Councillor Price possibly? It would be good to know how we are doing against budget. I know that is at some point. I mean, possibly the December meeting. If we're looking at the draft budget looking forward, then maybe if we can get to sort of a half-year update. Controversial suggestion, but the quarterly assurance report, which covers everything and anything, and we've had lots of very wide-ranging discussions here. Just a thought or a suggestion, do we really have to look at that every quarter? I mean, I know that actually in practice, I mean, just looking at the draft thing, we've got 3. So this meeting, is May, November and February. I mean, but then that's 3 out of 4. I don't know. I'd be happy with 2 out of 4.
I've got a really short answer to that. Do we need to look at every quarter? No. It's my kind of feeling on it, and I'll take views on it. I think there's sort of challenges with it, which is, I think it starts to drag us away from corporate policy, because we end up looking at everything, and I don't think any council is short of a few opinions about every single part of the council. So I think it leads to a temptation to want to talk about everything.
Yeah.
I think there is a timing challenge with it, a meeting sequence, because really the QAR is designed to fit in line with the cabinet meetings rather than our meetings, and it's quite often that we're looking at something that is very old, and I think that came up in a recent meeting. However, there's still a place for it. I certainly think there's key moments where we might want to look at performance generally and looking at how that's tracking and trending. I think the other thing something I was going to say when you were talking there about budget and the QAR, these documents are available. We don't need to wait for them to appear in a corporate overview and scrutiny agenda to actually review them. I'll probably embarrass her by pointing at the work that Councillor Price does outside of these panels and meetings, very often asking questions at Cabinet, very often sending me WhatsApp messages about Cabinet agenda items that I haven't quite seen myself yet. So these things are available. I think what it's about is being in touch with these things and seeing something that we think, hold on a minute, this needs to come up to a scrutiny panel is a better way of doing it. But I have been having some conversations with Sophia about timing and sequencing and when the right time to have a focus is on it. So I don't think it's a bad challenge at all to look at. Thank you very much. I think we'll carry on that debate and come back to people.
And one final thing, which is, and I'm not thinking of anything in particular here, but as well as policies, there's from time to time there are key strategic decisions that need to be made, and it'd be good, almost dare I say, to sort of hold a bit of time available. Don't feel we have to sort of pack the agenda for all of them, just so that we can, as and when the things need to be decided and done, if actually we can throw our 2 pence within, that might help.
Thank you very much. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you, Councillor Tizzy, for setting me up, but I'll come back to that in just a second. Councillor Howard and Mr. Evans talked about looking the future viewing. It's a strategic issue. We have to develop and plan to try and deal with the known unknowns and the unknown knowns, and Donald Rumsfeld, usual stuff. Should that be a point actually added to our constitution's first point or terms of reference? Because at the moment we talked about at the moment our panel will consider the following service areas: finance, revenues, benefits, library. Should that be a point when we're looking at future proofing? Should that be added to our constitution and our terms of reference? That is just a question to ask. Second point is the budget process. Clearly, we're in. It's always good to look at the budget process, but especially when we're in a difficult position as we are at the moment financially. So, is this something that we can bring forward very soon to perhaps even to the next corporate ONS and explore how we get involved in that budget process, because it, one of our terms of reference, it does specifically say to assist the cabinet in development of the council's annual budget. So I think that would be really useful to do that. And then the third point, which is Councillor Tisley setting me up, was key strategic decisions. Councillor Wilson at the Windsor Forum did say that we could bring to this panel a review of the Winter Yard decision. It's not saying that we are saying yes or no to it, but rather we need to ask questions and be really clear with residents that this is actually the best way forward. This looks at all the issues, all the options, and actually disposing of a freehold interest is the right thing. So Councillor Wilson said that we should bring that back to this meeting as opposed to any other meeting. So that's a third point. Thank you.
Yeah, just on that, because I read about that on Facebook, which was a nice way to find out about it. No, I've looked at the meeting. He sort of suggested you approach me, was his sort of recommendation. So that's fine. With that, I'm not convinced. I guess for me, it's a clarity, and I'm happy to take this on a separate meeting about what the discussion is aimed at. Because once you've got that, then you have to work out where the right place to have that. Because I'm not fully convinced. I know Councillor Wilson made that suggestion. I'm not fully convinced. Can I just finish what I was saying? So I'm not fully convinced corporate is the right place for it. I think place is probably, it's a place strategy, it's a place decision. But equally, it comes back to something I've talked about before, which is there's processes for calling in decisions, there's processes for scrutinising policy, and they're all slightly different and nuanced. And we've got to make sure we're really clear about what we're talking about before we make any decisions about where to discuss them.
Councillor Buckley, myself and Carpenter did try to call that in to place, and I don't think anyone in Windsor is really happy that it hasn't been scrutinised as a decision. So that was refused. No real valid reasons, or no real, no valid reasons given. But there's lack of clarity in our constitution as to what is the criteria for assessing when a call-in is accepted by officers and when it's not. So that caused us a great deal of concern. And out of that came the fact that, ignoring all of that, for the time being, Councillor Wilson has suggested, when we mentioned it at the Windsor Forum, that this was the place to come. It needs to go somewhere. I don't care where, but we need to review that decision and say yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down, or have you thought of this?
Councillor Price.
I disagree. The opportunity to question the decision was at Cabinet. There was, I think, 8 days' notice of the agenda. We are privileged in as much as we see part 2. The information in part 2, and I've been very careful how I phrase this, told us detailed background to the retail sector. Retailers, shopping centres know how they're doing in general terms. It gave us a valuation, it gave us reference on legal fees and business rates, on cash flows. So all that confidential information I read the public information, and I came to the conclusion that I thought that was a good decision. And so I didn't ask any questions. Now, nobody asked any questions, but the opportunity was there, and that was the time to do it before the decision was made. And there was plenty of time to do it, and there was plenty of time to speak to officers, as I do when I read the papers, and I don't understand something, or think something's wrong, or something's there. I write to the cabinet member, and I ask them the questions, and what about this? And they look at it, and then I can ask a question knowing there's an answer. So all that opportunity is there. If people have chosen not to take advantage of that opportunity, then they don't have a backstop and saying, oh, well, I missed out on that, I'll have another go. We'll have it at another meeting. We've got other things, we've got lots to do. And so I disagree.
May I come back? Okay. I don't mean to sort of make this sort of an open sort of discussion, but thank you for disagreeing. You're entitled to do that. It was a valid call-in within the time, legitimate times, and what you're effectively saying is that we don't want a public discussion to allay fears of residents in Windsor. That's what you're effectively saying. Because there was a timescale, we complied with that timescale, and you're not wanting to see that for Windsor. You have different points that you address your criteria for decision making on. So we're saying this has to be open. We need to look at all of the issues which were not entirely addressed in the document.
There is a call-in process which is laid down that you have to meet a certain barrier and a certain bar. And I'm assuming, therefore, that that call-in process went through that process. If it didn't, then you've got every right. But if it didn't go through the process, but if it went through that process and it says you haven't met the bar, you haven't met the bar.
Yeah, and that's a separate issue in terms of there's an obscurity as to what that bar is.
So what's your concern, Councillor De Costa? Is it the call-in process? Is it the scrutiny process? Is it the decision?
And I'm asking to bring it here. And if it's not here, we need to hear it somewhere. Otherwise, we're denying, you know, our residents, and this is the key asset, if you like, the key asset for Windsorians. We're denying them the opportunity to hear public scrutiny and have questions asked of that decision, which hasn't happened yet.
But I mean, that's a matter of opinion, Councillor De Costa, rather than fact, because as Councillor Price has mentioned, it was published in an agenda item at the beginning of April. It was, as a forward plan in the beginning of April. It was published as an agenda item in the middle of April, towards the end of April. It was discussed at a cabinet meeting where members of the public and members of the council can speak and ask questions. So it's there. I'm not denying you might not agree with the decision. There might be some residents that don't agree with the decision, but it's really important that we have processes, right? And the processes exist. Now, if you're not happy with the processes, then there's a constitution committee that can look at, you know, processes like that that might need reviewing.
Yeah, okay. As I've stated my case, there is an issue of process, but that's not the issue I'm raising here. It's and Councillor Wilson approached me at the last minute forum and said, let's hear this somewhere else at corporate. We'll speak to Mr. Councillor Moriarty. So that's where we're at. I want this heard. I want the opportunity to ask questions, and not just to ask questions for residents, to hear those questions. Thank you.
Well, any other points on that particular item? Councillor. Oh, Stephen, did you want to come in on that?
Sorry, Chris, your mic went off before you said. Look, I don't want to prolong the discussion. I want to make clear to everybody involved that the process was followed. A call-in was received. And reasons for the call-in were given. The monitoring officer reviewed that call-in within the timescales and rejected the call-in, and valid reasons were given. So the process was followed. It's now up to the committee to determine whether or not you want a discussion about it here. I'm not going to comment on that, but I just wanted to make clear to everybody around the table that a process was followed and the monitoring officer gave the reasons as to why it didn't reach the threshold.
Just to add to Stephen's comments, and I think just to respond to a couple of Councillor De Costa's comments as well, particularly around the terms of reference for the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Panel and the remit sort of changes suggested there, and the reasons for the call-in as well in terms of that criteria which is set out in the Constitution. If you've got concerns that those aren't tight enough, you want those to be reviewed, that's something we can put forward to the Constitution Working Group, which is chaired by Councillor Werner. They can discuss that and put potentially a proposal forward to full council. And I'm sure they'd love to hear from you in terms of your experience of the call-in process, what didn't work for you and what you think could be changed about that. If you're unhappy about that, we can explore that in the Constitution Working Group.
And just to sort of close off the point, unless there's anyone who wants to further support it, as things currently stand, I'm not convinced that this is the right forum to have that conversation. And, you know, I get that you want to continue the conversation, but it's not here. And you know, as I've done before, I always make myself available to have conversations about that, and I can do that. But
can we ask, does anyone else support that request and suggestion from Councillor Wilson that we examine that decision here?
I think I did ask, but Councillor Teasey, did you want to come in on that?
Thank you. There are two questions here. Let me. So the question one is the specifics of the Windsor Yards. What happened with Windsor Yards? I completely disagree with Councillor De Costa. I think it was an excellent decision and very well done. This was in the forward plan. It was put to cabinet, properly. And as I said, it ultimately came down to commercial decisions. And I have to say, this was something that had been stuck in limbo for a long time, and there was a lot of work went in the background. And I thought this was an excellent decision. It's really, really going to be good for Windsor residents. Hopefully, when this is, it will improve enormously a very tired corner of town. That's all by the by. The second point is, what is the role of this committee in future in similar or similar discussions? And again, I completely disagree with Councillor De Costa on this. I don't think it's for us to be trying to sort of second guess the commercials of specific cabinet decisions. I don't think that's our role. I think that is that there are reasons why these things are in part two. We do have an opportunity, but not in this forum, to sort of second guess questions of commerciality. So no, I don't agree with the suggestion that somehow a similar similar decisions like that should come to be second guessed here.
Councillor Werner, is it all right if we let other people speak for a bit? Councillor Werner.
Thank you very much. It's certainly not my role to say what I think should or shouldn't go to a scrutiny. That's got to be left up to the scrutiny. I'm as chairman of the Constitutional Working Group, however, I'm very happy to hear any views on how the call-in process could be changed, loosened. Obviously, the way it's phrased at the moment, it's not a councillor decision, it's not my decision, it's very much kept away from me and decided on a strict formula by the officers of whether a call-in should be acceptable. But as I said, I'm really happy to look at it. I am a little bit annoyed that you feel that the cabinet wasn't the place to discuss this. In fact, it was absolutely the place it should have been discussed. There were no public or councillors who asked any questions on the Windsor Yards. All the councillors had access to the agenda, both of part one and part two. There was no discussion either in part one or part two at the cabinet raised by any of the non-cabinet members. So I think it's a little bit unfair of you to say that the opportunity to discuss it hasn't been given to you, because of course cabinet is exactly the place where that kind of stuff is discussed. But as I said, you've got your views, and it's not for me to comment on what scrutiny should discuss, but please bring forward your proposals to the Constitutional Working Group.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to talk on that item? As long as we sort of move on from it, because it's taken a lot of time.
So yes, I mean, we did follow the call-in process, so we'll come back to you on the call-in process. But going back to Councillor Tizzy's point, I'm not questioning the valuation report. It's not about the valuation report. It's about seeing where this sits in with the overall sort of corporate plan, understanding, for example, was a profit made? Was a profit not made, or capital gain made? And if this is an asset that's being lost to Windsorians, what is a quid pro quo for that financial investment? There are lots of other issues other than the valuation. It isn't about the valuation. I'm not going to question the valuation. So it's just to point out it's bigger than that.
Councillor Howard.
I don't quite understand why we are talking about this still. I would like to move on to the next item.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard. Thank you for bringing it. I think the points have been well made, and we'll move on. Has anyone got anything else? Councillor Cross, thank you for waiting.
No problem. No, just following on from Councillor Howard and the work programme on corporate IT strategy and talking about being fit for the future. I've spoken to Mark about this some time ago, the use of AI. It's a broad, big, huge topic. It's probably the elephant in the room, but, I think if we need to be a council, and we should be a council that's looking forward and doing the right decisions by our residents, we should be looking at AI and how that can be utilised in our organisation. So I'm not sure where that sits, but it needs to sit on a work programme somewhere. So that's my 2 pence.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Working for an AI company, I know that there's a lot of organisations scrambling around trying to work out what AI means, both from ethics point of view, but also from a data point of view. So I think that's an excellent suggestion. Stephen, did you want to answer to that?
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to need an AI policy at some point. I don't know when, but certainly that should come here as we develop it.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Any more? Now, the only one so all of the ones that you guys have suggested I had on my list. The only other one, and I think I described it as being slightly meta last time I talked about it, is I think we should scrutinise scrutiny. And I suspect the conversation we've just had in the last 15 or so minutes might strengthen that argument that we need to scrutinise scrutiny. So what do we mean by that? I think what it would be good to do is look at how other authorities manage and conduct their scrutiny, the processes, the scope, all the rest of it. So I'm quite keen for that to happen sooner rather than later. And I think that will be beneficial, not just to this panel, but to the other panels and how they all stitch together and how we can get, I think great strides have been made on the transparency front in the last 2 years, but I think we can do even more. So I will add that to the list. So I've made a bit of a list here of some of those items. I think there's, outside of that, generally there's the kind of point on budget and QAR that we need to just sort of get right. I think generally speaking, I think this is just a general kind of almost like a hygiene factor, but I think we use policy and strategy as a word interchangeably. And sometimes I think we just got to be really clear on what the difference is. And I think someone sort of half mentioned that earlier on about understanding what they are, what we're looking at, and therefore we can make better judgments about where and when it should come in for scrutiny. We mustn't forget Councillor Price's point about milestones rather than just final drafts. There's going to be points in a project. Like, for instance, one, I think Councillor Da Costa, you sort of hinted at this, which is under strategic priority 1.4, governance arrangements around budget setting and all the rest of it. It's got a March 2028 timeline on it. We don't want to wait until March 2028 to be looking at it. You know, there's elements along the way that we can be looking at. And I think the final bit is, we talked about a bit sort of points of reference. I think this will help us understand if we've got a real kind of clarity about what this panel should be looking at and shouldn't be looking at, which might help some of the conversations that we had today as well. So a snappy one. We finally got the foundations of a work programme, which will make Mark so happy because he's always on at me about the work programme. So thanks for all your input on that. Thanks for your input on to the other bits. And I think unless anyone's got any more, that is us finished. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, officers, as well. Thank you.